Hey everyone, it's Dr. Scott. There were some questions that came up during the midterm course evaluations and then also the perusal assignment where you all gave me feedback on the final project prompt. And I wanted to go through and address some of those questions and make sure that we're all on the same page. I also wanted to thank you all for your feedback on the final project prompt and the midterm course evaluation. Very helpful. A lot of it was positive, but there were a couple of questions that came up and I want to address them here. One issue that came up was that the 50% thing, like the final project being 50% of the final course grade. There's a joke about that. There was also questions like, are we on the hook for just doing this on our own and then we're not practicing any of this between now and the end of the term? You all are definitely going to be working on aspects of the final project between now and the end of the term. So beginning week 9, you're going to be learning about different methods that are used in the discipline, textual analysis, interviews, think observations, things like that. But beginning week 9, you're also going to be working on pieces of the final project. So each week I'm going to be taking a major chunk of the final project and say, hey, we need to start thinking about this and share your ideas, and sometimes even like you need to write some content for it. So I think the first thing that we're going to do in week 9 is start thinking about your literature review. What are the different trends that you've noticed in your research? And when I say trends, I'm also thinking like, what are the different paragraphs or sections of your literature review that you could write? In week 9, I'm going to ask you to think through what some of those things might be. So we will be working on aspects of the final project between now and the end of the term. There's a couple other questions about the whether if you're a certificate or portfolio student, does your final project in this class, is it going to look different from somebody that's actually working on a thesis? And the answer is no. If you're working on, if you're actually going to pursue the thesis option, or if you're doing you're working on the certificate, the graduate certificate, or if you are working on the master's and you're going to take the portfolio option, all of those are fine. Like, no shame on any of those options. I think that they're all depending upon your situation, like any one of them are just fine. Your final project in this class, it shouldn't look any different if you're going to be pursuing a master's thesis. You're actually going to do the research project. Now, if you tell me over midterms that, I think I'm going to do the master's thesis, I'm actually going to do a study, my feedback might be a little bit more directive, and it might be, you really do need to rethink this thing that you're doing here. But the final product, the final project in this class, it shouldn't be demonstrably different from somebody that's pursuing the portfolio option for the capstone, or their certificate student. They don't have to do a capstone project either way. So, your final project, like there are the things I'm asking for in the prompt, I'm asking them of everybody. Thesis students, portfolio students, certificate students. The cover sheet, there was a question about what the cover sheet should look like if you're a certificate student. I think you would just mention it on it that you'll be pursuing neither a portfolio nor a thesis because you are a certificate student. I think just adding something like that would be just fine. There was a question whether or not you could, the decision that you make, is it final? Like if you decide to choose a thesis, can you go to portfolio? If you decide the portfolio, can you go to thesis? You can go from thesis to portfolio. So you start a thesis project, in the final project, the cover letter says that you're going to pursue a thesis project. And then, over the summer, you realize you're going to be out of steam and you're not going to be able to work on that project. Or maybe you bit off a bit more you could chew and you think the portfolio was a better option for you. That's totally fine. You can make that choice. Going from portfolio to thesis is a much different thing, and it's something you would want to talk to Dr. Jen Scott a fair bit about. If you choose a portfolio, you should probably just stick with the portfolio. If you choose the thesis, you can stay the course and do that thesis, or you can switch and change and switch to portfolio. Other questions that came up. There was a question about the IRB process. process. We're going to work on that later this term with this video. I'm going to get you a link to the IRB website at Shawnee State University. There are basically three types of review. One is exempt. That means you're working on a project where no vulnerable populations, no kids, nobody that's incarcerated, nobody that's from a marginalized group, and you're asking them questions that are just they're not triggering, they're not traumatic or anything like that. You may be conducting interviews or you're asking them to do a survey, something like that. Exempt. Expedited, that might involve working with children, but the questions that you're asking, they're also about pretty normal things. Like, you're not asking them about anything particularly traumatic. And then, if you're working with children, or there might be a situation where privacy might be an issue, like their names might be released or something like that, or you might need to deceive your research participants because of your research question, then an expedited. So there's a little bit more of scrutiny of that project, but it wouldn't necessarily need to go to the full board. Full board means you're working with children underneath the age of 18. You're probably doing some kind of project that's going to ask them about some pretty sensitive topics, or you're collecting tissue samples or something like that. Don't do that in a composition study. In those kind of situations, then a full board project is appropriate. Based on what I've learned about the different projects that you all are proposing, it's either exempt or expedited. I don't see anybody doing a project that would require full board approval. The IRB website explains that stuff. It doesn't do a great job. The forms are also really super clunky, and there's PDF versions of them. I'm going to take the relevant questions and put them into a Word document, and then you all can choose. There's like a decision tree on the IRB website to help you identify whether or not this is an exempt or an expedited project. I'll send you a link to that. But as far as the form, I'll make that easier when we get to that part of the process in a few weeks. So there are several questions about IRB, and I understand that it's a little clunky and a little confusing. But again, for most projects that I'm seeing, it's exempt or expedited. Okay, I think. Oh, there was a question about surveys and interviews, and if you're a certificate student, or you decided to do a portfolio, do you still need to put together the survey or the interview protocol or the focus group protocol? And the answer is yes. Again, whatever project, however you're doing a capstone, or whether you're a certificate or a master's degree student, it doesn't really matter in terms of what I'm asking for in this class. You should be providing me with a survey instrument if you're pitching a survey project. Same thing goes with surveys. With interviews or focus groups. Finally, there was a question about the literature review and roughly how many sources are used in a literature review. And I hear you out that I don't have a solid number that I can give you, like it shall be this number. But I did do an average of last year. The lowest was 9. The highest, I had 2 students that had 20 citations. The average was 14.67. So 14 and 2/3 sources is your average. Do with that information as you want. If you want me to, I will be reading drafts, and we'll be seeing each other's drafts as we make progress towards the final project. And if you're particularly worried about this issue later on, let me know. Reach out. We'll figure something out. Finally, I want to say, as we come out of midterm, out of spring break, and the midterm project after a conference with everybody, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to chatting with y'all about your projects. We are going to learn about different methods in the discipline. So y'all have done a bunch of research in the field, and it's helped inform your research question. That question might get shifted even a little bit further as you learn about some of the different methods that are out there in the discipline. So if you've got a project right now, it's like, this is going to be an interview project, and you learn about survey, and you're like, well, I think surveys might be able to help me learn about this aspect of this phenomena that I'm interested in. That should shift your question a little bit more, because surveys are predisposed to particular kinds of research questions as opposed to others. If you've got a question about impact or correlation, a pre and post test through a survey can help you measure some of that. If you're talking about perceptions and how people feel about things, interview, focus group. So what I'm saying is, like, you guys are getting pretty close with your research questions. They might shift just a little bit more as you learn about some of the different methods in the field. Okay. Thank you all for your time. I hope y'all are doing well. Looking forward to chat with y'all about your research projects. And that's it for now.